Hell yeah, we're just jumping right into it. Welcome back to the Nine Line Podcast. I have on Carey Kight. He's a former Air Force veteran and now is in film production, filmmaking, producing, storytelling. And I'm super pumped to have you on the podcast. And we'll just jump right into it. Starting with the first question, where'd you come from? How'd you grow up, and then what made you want to join the Air Force?
For sure. First of all, thanks for having me. Super stoked to be here. Excited to have the roles reversed here a little bit. Obviously, I hosted you on my podcast, which was fun, and now I get to kind of sit on the other side. So it's always fun. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
So I grew up splitting time between San Diego, California, and Columbus, Ohio. So my folks are divorced. My mom's side of the family is from California. My dad's side of the family is from Ohio, and so I spent like basically, like 0 to 13 in Southern California, and then moved to Columbus, Ohio in 8th grade. So grew up, playing sports, grew up in the outdoors, camping, surfing, kind of doing all those California things, which I loved. But I also spent a good amount of time each year in Columbus visiting my dad's side of the family. So I kind of had that like split upbringing, which was certainly difficult in some ways. Obviously, being a child of divorce isn't always easy, but going back and forth between those two particular places and kind of transitioning in and out each time that I went back and forth, I actually really, really enjoyed, and kind of gave me the opportunity to appreciate, both places, and to appreciate kind of what this country has to offer in terms of a range of places to live, a range of things to do, a range of just ways to live and be. So yeah, I mean, I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened. I was in art class, and my dad was actually in DC on business at the time. And this was, cell phones were certainly a thing, obviously, in 2001, but not as ubiquitous as they are now. Not like FaceTime and WhatsApp and iMessage, like doing it super quickly. So my dad did have a cell phone, and so I actually remember calling, using the landline in art class with my teacher, who didn't particularly like me. For what that's worth. But I told her, I said, hey, my dad's in DC right now. We're watching all this stuff unfold on TV, on those like carts that they had back in the day where like you rolled a big ass TV in. And, and so she was like, yes, absolutely. Like, try to call him, call your stepmom, whatever. So couldn't get a hold of him, called her. She said she couldn't get a hold of him. We were a little bit worried, but not too worried. And so, the principal ended up coming on the loudspeaker and saying, all teachers turn the TVs off. Kids go to school as normal. Then when you get home, you can, the parents can talk to their kids about this, what obviously ended up being a national tragedy kind of unfolding. And so kind of went the whole rest of that day. And then my stepmom got a hold of my dad. He rented a car, drove straight home. And so we were watching everything on the news that night. And then my dad, pulled up, and we kind of went and met him in the driveway and hugged and everything. And it was kind of like one of those, formative moments as a citizen. At that point, I hadn't really been interested in serving. My grandfather was the commander of the Civil Air Patrol in the state of Ohio. So he's in the kind of Army Air Corps, and then Air Force as it turned into the Air Force, and did a little bit, but more on the civilian side. He's a private pilot and flew for the Civil Air Patrol. And then that was my dad's dad, and then my dad's youngest sibling, his brother was in the Marine Corps for a year, did ROTC at Ohio State. And then got injured, non-combat related, but got injured. And so ultimately ended up medically retiring early. So there's some service in my family, but nothing that was, like generational, right? There was nothing that was like, I wasn't super interested in serving at the time. But as 9/11 happened and spent the next, few years of high school trying to figure out exactly what it was that I wanted to do after high school, service kind of became something that presented itself as an option in a way that I think for a lot of us that participated in the GWAT, like during that time from 2001 to 2006-ish, as these things ramped up, it definitely became kind of more of a viable option. And so I played sports in high school. I ran track, played basketball, played football, was pretty good, but wasn't good enough, to go play like Division I football or anything like that. My brother actually played Division III football, and so I kind of fell in love with that atmosphere. And that kind of like more small time college football. No disrespect, but it's smaller and kind of more intimate, and I really liked that, going to his games every weekend. And so that's what I thought I wanted to do after high school. And the problem with that is they don't give athletic scholarships at small liberal arts colleges like that. You have to get an academic scholarship. And my grades weren't super good. They weren't terrible, but they weren't great. So I certainly wasn't in a position to earn, a grant or a scholarship or anything like that.
Mhm.
And so my dad made a deal with me, like right before senior year, and said, if you want to go play football at one of these schools, they are expensive. I will pay for half if you can meet me halfway and get, grants and scholarships on the academic side to pay for half of it. And I said, okay, that sounds good. So I was working on my test scores, working on my grades, while putting recruiting tape and all that stuff together at the beginning of my senior year in the fall of 2005. And just did not get enough. I ultimately ended up getting about a third of tuition for one of the schools that I wanted to go to. And I went into his office and I told him, said, hey, all the deadlines have passed. Like, we're here. Uh, I have one third. Like, is there wiggle room? Like, can you meet me at 2/3? And he said, absolutely not. I said, well, if I got a third, like, would you pay like up to like a certain amount and then I could just get a loan for the rest? And he's like, no, I told you if you met me halfway, I would pay for half. So you got to figure out what you're going to do now at this point. And so he gave me a couple of options. I was working waiting tables and stuff like that. And he was like, listen, at this point, you got to figure out what you want to do. Like, if you want to just work, go to community college, go to some state schools. But I had not obviously, but I did. I had applied to some state schools in Ohio, like, University of Cincinnati, Bowling Green, Kent State, Akron, like those kinds of schools. And got in, and was able to kind of choose from those. But again, there was no like scholarship opportunities there because I had focused all of my efforts on these smaller D3 schools to go play football. And so he's like, you got to figure out what you want to do. All right. So I was at Steak and Shake working one day, and I'm like, you know what? Let me call one of these state schools and see if I can get like maybe ROTC. Like, just again, service was kind of in the back of my mind, but nothing, at the forefront. And so I went into my manager's office on break at Steak and Shake, and I called the ROTC department, like detachment at Bowling Green State University, which is one of the state schools that I had gotten into. And I guess this would have been spring, spring of 2006. So we're talking like 6 months before the fall semester is going to start on that same calendar year, right? So
Mhm.
the guy laughs at me when I asked him if there was any slots. Like, what are the options? He's like, no. He's like, you can come to Bowling Green, pay for your first year and then apply next year to get into ROTC, but then you're behind, right? Like you're 1 year behind all of the other cadets and then a year ahead in school. And so he's like, you certainly can do that. You can try, but there's no guarantees. And then you're paying out of pocket for the first year of school and all that. And I'm like, man, this is frustrating. I guess this is why you're not supposed to procrastinate, wait for the last minute. So he said, why don't you try the enlisted recruiter? Find the enlisted recruiter in your area and call them. And so I said, all right, thanks. I hung up the phone and I'm like, man, I guess I'll try that. Like, at this point, I was kind of out of options. Like, I was frustrated. I wanted to go do these things in college, but like I hadn't done enough to get myself the opportunity to do those things. So I called the enlisted recruiter just like out of the blue, and the guy was like, yeah, sure, I'll come to your school tomorrow. So the next day, I'm at school, and the guy shows up, Air Force recruiter shows up, and I'm waiting in the made an appointment with the counselor, right? The high school guidance counselor, and like went and sat in the conference room, was waiting for this guy, and he walks in. And I kind of randomly chosen the Air Force. Like, I didn't have any sort of like I said, grandfather was Army Air Corps, Air Force, Civil Air Patrol. My uncle was Marine Corps, but I didn't have like any sort of thoughts of like what I would want to do in the military and Air Force. Just relatively random. So he shows up, he's got the packet, right? And he sits down and starts talking and starts kind of flipping through. And I'm kind of half listening to what he's saying. I'm just like looking at the pictures on the fold out, right? And it gets to a photo of a dude with a rucksack, with a rifle, with paint on his face, and rifle trained, kind of like lurking through the jungle, which just every kid, you're just like, yeah,
Yeah.
man, this is awesome. And so I stopped him. I said, what's that? And he said, that's Air Force Special Operations. And I said, oh, tell me a little bit more about that. And he said, well, there's two. There's pararescue and there's combat control. And I didn't even ask what they did. I just said, which one's harder? And he said, well, they call the PJ pipeline Superman school. And I said, okay, great, let's do that. And he said, what? I said, yeah, I want to do that one. He goes, you don't want to hear the rest of like, what the Air Force has to offer? I said, nope, I don't. I want to do that one. I want to do the hard one. And he said, okay, well, there's some steps we have to take here. You have to take the ASVAB, the written test, and then you have to take what's called the PASS test, which is like, physical and stamina test to get into selection, right? And I said, okay, what is that? And he said, swim 500 meters, run a mile and a half, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups. And I was like, great, I could do that. Like, when can we schedule that? And he's like, you can swim? And I was like, yeah, I actually grew up in California, like swimming and playing water polo and doing all that stuff. So it really shouldn't be a problem. I don't need that much time to train for it. And I'm also running track right now. So let's just do it. And he said, okay. So he scheduled a PASS test. I passed it. And then so I got the slot and then finished up, senior year of high school and was just waiting on a slot to drop for Air Force basic training and then pararescue indoctrination course. And I think they do it a little bit differently now, but that's kind of how they did it back in 2006. So finished up track season, finished up school, graduated from high school, worked over the summer, kind of hung out at home. Slot drops in October. I went in October, went through boot camp, went through pararescue indoc, got injured at the very end of indoc. So I actually made it to the end of the selection course, but I did not make it through the selection course, which was really, really hard for me. I failed the run by 7 seconds, like the final run, by 7 seconds. But all the water confidence, all the rucking, all the swimming, all of the everything else was totally fine. And I failed that run by 7 seconds. It was brutal. And I remember going into the commandant's office and he was like, I could just push you through, but we don't do that. And so you'll have to get recycled and try it again. And at that point, you just get recycled halfway through the course. You don't have to do the whole thing over again. Like, all right, that's fine. And then I got in a car accident the next weekend and busted up my knee and came back, to base and had stitches and all that stuff. There was nothing structurally wrong with the knee at the time, just like a really bad busted dashboard knee. And so they said, listen, we can't let you rehab and keep you in the program. It's just too expensive. So you're going to have to go to the conventional Air Force. And then if you want to retrain or cross train, you can come back at some point. And that was pretty devastating for me because I had made this decision to join the Air Force relatively, without intention, right? I didn't grow up wanting to be a SEAL, right? Or wanting to be a Green Beret or wanting to be a Ranger. I just kind of had this thing fall into my lap due to some circumstances that I wasn't handling my high school years well. And so then I had this cool opportunity, got all the way through the selection course, absolutely loved my time there and had just the best challenges that you can imagine physically and mentally and emotionally and all that stuff. And then I just was almost there and then got into a car accident and then just wasn't able to do that. And so it was really, really hard for me to handle that. But I did. I think they gave me the option I could get out because I wasn't fulfilling the contract, but it would have been an honorable discharge, but I wouldn't have gotten my benefits or anything like that. But I made the difficult decision, what was difficult for me, to stay in and go retrain into something that the Air Force needed. And I didn't know what that was going to be. You didn't even really get the option to put another job that you wanted to do. At this point, they're going to go put you where they need you. And so, it was probably a dark month while I was just waiting, rehabbing, my knee and my leg and all that stuff and waiting for my slot. And so I ended up getting what's called armament system specialist, which is loading bombs and missiles and gun ammo on fighters. And so I left Lackland Air Force Base, went to Shepherd Air Force Base, and went and did, I think, 4 or 5 months of tech school. And then went off from there, went to RAF Lakenheath in the UK and deployed twice to Bagram from Lakenheath and did a handful of TDYs around Europe doing work with NATO and our kind of allied air forces and doing different training programs and leadership programs and working with different air forces around Europe. And, I absolutely loved it. It was a really difficult transition for me from special operations into the conventional Air Force. I brought with me some pretty like judgmental thoughts about myself and kind of about the rest of the Air Force, and then kind of weirdly on the special operations community as well. And so I had to like work through that. And I thought the entire time that I was loading bombs and doing my job, I was like, I'm going to cross train back into something like that. But as I finished my enlistment and the time was going to come for me to make a decision about what I was going to do, re-enlist and try to cross train, or separate and use the GI Bill and go back to college, I realized that what I really wanted to do was be a filmmaker and go study the thing that I wanted to study in college, which was screenwriting and filmmaking and production and all of that. And I didn't actually really want to do the job of an operator. And I realized that I had that sort of it's a weird realization to come to, right? Where you're like, I'm putting this thing up on a pedestal because I think it's cool and I think it's important and I think it's something that like has prestige, but it's also not something I actually want to do. Like I've served for 4 years. I've had a great time. I've had great experiences. I've had myriad challenges across the board, physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, all of that stuff. And I actually just was ready to get out, and I was ready to go pursue the thing I really wanted to do, which was go study screenwriting and filmmaking. So I made the decision to separate, let the enlistment expired, and I did. Left the Air Force and went back home to Columbus, Ohio, to go to Ohio State.
Nice. So what was that initial then, like, find out you want to be a filmmaker? So you said that first year in college, and then so what kind of sparked that bug? Like for me, like I found out when I was like 13 I wanted to do that, and so I dove into that. Like, was there a spark, or was there like a realization or something that you did that was like, I want to do this? Because like I said, you thought about it all through the Air Force while you're enlisted. Like,
Yeah.
and I was the same way. I was like, I can't wait to get out of the Marine Corps and go to film school, or pursue that path, and just I can't wait. So what was it, that initial thing that brought that inspiration to become a filmmaker?
Yeah, it's a great question. So actually, as a kid, I wanted to be an actor. And so like that was kind of always my dream, was to be an actor. And when I was in high school, because I played 3 sports, fall, spring, and winter, right? Or spring, yeah, fall, winter, spring, football, basketball, and track. I didn't have time to participate in productions, but I was in the theater club, and I did take theater classes when I was in high school. And so kind of wanting to be an actor when I was younger, and then reading. I didn't read screenplays in high school, but I did read, stage plays, right? And read kind of like about how to make something on the theater side of things. And then, I'm a big DVD kid. You and I've talked about this. Like I would buy the DVDs, certainly watch the movies, but what I was most obsessed with was the behind the scenes documentaries and the featurettes about like how to make stuff. And so I was kind of giving myself an education in high school, about filmmaking and the filmmakers that I liked. And I started to develop like a real, legitimate taste for what it was that I liked, just as a consumer. And I started to think about what I might want to make. And it started to shift from wanting to be an actor to wanting to be a writer director. And I did well in English. I was kind of like I was like an art history English kid, not really science, not really a STEM kid, right? And so took a bunch of art classes in school, took theater classes in school, and just like I really started to think about art and storytelling and filmmaking kind of as a whole, instead of just through that narrow lens of being an actor. And I think, probably, to be totally honest, I wanted to be an actor for the same reason I wanted to be an operator. It was cool, right? It's like there was that kind of prestige of like winning an Oscar or whatever it was. And then as I was spending time in the military loading bombs and kind of like getting more granular and more sort of like blue collar and tinkery with all of the different like jobs that I was doing and the tasks, I started to think about like building things at a smaller scale to like then build to a larger thing. So I had the love for filmmaking and storytelling was always there. And then the desire of like what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it kind of shifted. And so it seemed to me the most the smartest, most efficient thing to study would be screenwriting, because that's where you start. That's the blueprint for a film, right? It's the blueprint for a commercial. It's the blueprint for anything. You start with the script, you
Yep.
start with the copy, right? So it just seemed to me to make the most sense to start with A, what I was good at, which is writing, and B, what's the basic building block of a film. And so, yeah, so that's why I decided to major in screenwriting. Well, I majored in film studies at Ohio State with a minor in screenwriting, and kind of quickly realized that the program at Ohio State was more of like a film criticism
Yeah.
like type of curriculum, and less of a practical, like, how do you actually write screenplays and make movies.
Mhm. So that after you got out, so you went to Ohio State then and finished that out with your degree
Uh,
after the Air Force.
After the Air Force, I did 1 year at Ohio State, and then
Oh,
I
okay.
had I had an interesting experience at Ohio State. So I loved being at Ohio State. Most of my family on my dad's side went there. Big fan of the football team. Was super excited to kind of
Yeah.
like participate in college like that. A couple of my friends from high school were still in the area. One of my high school quarterback, who was a freshman my senior year, so he was younger than me. He was actually at Ohio State at the same time as I was, which was kind of funny. We were the same grade now, because we
Yeah.
had kind of caught up, because of my service. So that was cool. So I really enjoyed that. The problem was, being a 22, 23-year-old military student at a big state school like that is pretty hard. And I was working, tending bar and waiting tables, and working 30 to 40 hours a week, and then studying and going to class. And I did pretty well academically, but I had two classes that I did very poorly in. Um, one of which was Com 101, 500-person lecture hall course. I failed that class. I got an F, because all of the tests, I was studying and taking notes and diligently trying to learn about human communication and the cultural evolution of human communication, from literally, the course was a survey, started with cave drawings all the way up until, at that time,
Yeah.
television, cable news, and on movies and TV and all that stuff. So I was really interested in the meat of all of that, but they were just interested in kind of testing me on names and dates. And I'm like, I failed this class because I studied the wrong things, and that kind of felt like bullshit to me. And then the second course I had, and I jokingly say that I earned a D minus in this class. I took a 300 level comparative mythology class, and I fucking loved it. Like, it was a great
Mhm.
class. Our teacher, the professor in that class, she was from rural West Virginia, worked in factories her whole life, just like short and just like stacked. Like,
Yeah.
she was just like a real, like, blue collar, like, working person, like working class person, who had this background and worked like that, but like had studied poetry and like had a PhD in like comparative mythology, and was teaching this course. And so
Mhm.
I was just like, I loved it, but I struggled in that class, and I worked really hard, and she kind of noticed that, and she pulled me aside, after one particular assignment, and she's like, "Listen, you're working really hard, and you're very smart. I can tell." And she's like, "I can tell you can write, and you have things to say." She's like, "But this is a 300 level course. There were two courses you should have taken before this. I don't know why they let you take this course." And she kind of mentioned something about like GI Bill students just kind of get passed over a little bit. They're just like, yeah, no, we're getting money from you. We're getting money from the federal government. So
Yeah.
just take the classes that you want to take. And so I ended up having like a real deep heart to heart with her. I was like, I think I need to leave. And she's like, I think you might be right, but what do you mean when you say that you need to leave? I said, I think I need to find a program that's more geared towards exactly what I want to do and is more practical. And she said, that's absolutely right. And so I researched like, what are the best screenwriting major schools, programs at what schools, and a bunch of schools came up: University of Michigan, University of Miami down in Florida, Florida State University, and then this other school called Full Sail University in Orlando, Florida came up, and it was is a kind of one of those like for profit, like DeVry or Phoenix, but it's geared towards the
Yeah.
arts. And so it's you get a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I have a BFA in creative writing for entertainment, but it's an accelerated program. It's a little bit more, like commuter school style, and it's very practical, very tactical, very hands-on. And so I left Ohio State and went down to Orlando and did a 4-year degree in 2.5 years down there. And I studied kind of every kind of writing imaginable, every genre imaginable when it comes to narrative storytelling. So film writing, short story writing, comic book and graphic novel writing, video game writing, Not much copywriting, just a little bit. And then you studied all the genres. So you studied comedy, drama, thriller, horror, fantasy, sci-fi, everything. So you just got a broad range of subject matters that you were studying, and you were also writing through the program. So I had 4 short stories that I got published. I self-published. Those 4 pieces were like flash fiction, kind of shorter stories. I self-published a longer form short story, and then I wrote 2 screenplays, 2 short screenplays while I was down there, and then one of which I submitted for some awards and did pretty well, kind of like on the online screenplay competition circuit.
Awesome. So that's awesome. So you went down in that writer's path. I mean, I'm with you, because I've had that same experience of being like, going to film school and finding out like what is the, people that are going to be critics or the people that are going to actually make something, and like I found that too with Minneapolis Tech after I got my first degree, my bachelor's overseas while I was working, but then coming back and being like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. Like, this is, like cinematography, like I'm with you. Like I wanted to be a film director, but I always wanted to know how to make it. And so when I talked to my professor, eventually became my professor, when I looked at Minneapolis Tech, he was like, well, you want to be a cinematographer because you want to know actually how it's made.
Yeah.
And directors are great. He's like, but directors, sometimes they don't even touch the camera. And that blew my mind, because everyone that I admired, Michael Bay, Ridley Scott, all you see them working the cameras. They knew how to light. They talk about what they're doing, in the DVD commentaries. And I was like, well, that's crazy. He's like, yes, I'm just sort of like, I don't know, whatever you think is a good angle. So,
Yeah.
But when it comes to screenwriting, though, I mean, taking that crash course then with Full Sail, how rapidly did you learn, like when you started writing, like, holy shit, this is it, this is what I really want to do? Like, so is that something that just kind of, like I said, that,
Yeah.
not blew your mind? Like I got excited when I first turned the camera back on. I was a little scared,
Yeah.
when I went to film school. I was like 26 and I'm like, oh my God, I've been building this up for 13 years of my life. Am I going to be good? Am I still going to love it? And it's like, all right, or is this going to just completely poof out my future on what I've ever wanted to do, and I suck at it or I don't like it? So did you kind of have that where you were like, holy shit, this is like the path forward, that feeling?
I did. It was more. It was very calming for me. Like it was very validating. Like all of the decisions that I had made, however imperfectly, however unintentionally, all of the decisions that I had made up to that point put me in the right place. So I'm not going to sit here and say that every decision I made was the right one, but all of those decisions put me in the right place. And I got down there, and the first couple of courses I think I took online just because I wanted to like get going. And so my lease wasn't up in Columbus yet, so I started taking some classes online, and then my first month down in Orlando was online, so that was kind of a hard month. But the first month on campus was with a professor, actually, who I talked to yesterday, still a good buddy of mine. And that first class on campus was the most relaxed. It might be the most relaxed I've ever been in my entire life, to be honest with you. Like that month was just like, it was such a great validating feeling to be like, I'm here, there's work to do. I know this is what I want to do, and I know there's a path forward to make this a career. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I know that I can do it. Oh, did I lose you? You there? Yeah.
I'm still there.
Cool. Yeah. So it was like, it wasn't like an acute, like, holy shit, let's go. It was more of just like all right, man, let's go. It's like kind of like, just like kind of had that. It's like, it was like, yeah, more McConaughey, right? It was just kind of like, all right, here we are. Like, let's go, let's get to work. And that first month, that professor, his name is Michael Ferraro, great guy. Like he it was a course. They've since changed the name. I try to remember what the name of the course was. It was like Introduction to like Basic Story Structure or Film Structure, some clunky name like that. But basically, what it was write a screenplay and then make a film. So like everybody in the course, everybody in the class, there's like 12 of us, all wrote short screenplays, like 2 to 5 page screenplays, and then we all just did a democratic vote on which one we wanted to make, and then we all kind of put each other in positions like director, cinematographer, editor, like all these different things, and then we just kind of put a film crew together and we went out and shot it. And actually my short screenplay got chosen, and we made it, and somebody else directed it, and I acted in it, and kind of got to put all of the things together from my childhood that I was super excited about, together and into one like really shitty final. I'll share it with you if you want to. I should make like a secret link, like view only link or something on the website, and you can link it out. It's funny. It's called Spy Games. It's like a just like a really funny kind of like coming of age, really poorly made, but still warms my heart to watch it because it was just like so much love went into that. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it was just a great feeling. And I remember thinking to myself, all right, here we go, time to build your career. And I had a very specific thought as I was with other younger students who were going to this program to kind of study what they wanted to study too. I'm sure they probably came from backgrounds where their parents were like, really, you want to go study art? You want to go study screenwriting? Everybody says like, that's really hard. Are you sure you can make a career out of it? And I noticed that
Mhm.
they were really interested in, big AAA blockbuster style, sci-fi fantasy comic book movies, which I love those
Mhm.
things too, but that's kind of what they were writing. And what I was writing was things that I could actually make because I
Yeah.
saw the next step in the process, which is yes, I want to be a screenwriter, and yes, I would love to send them to festivals and competitions and get recognition that way. But really, at the end of the day, I want to make these things. So
Mhm.
I started to think really early about what are the um, guardrails that I can put on my own writing process to ensure that what I'm writing is producible,
Yeah.
efficiently and cheaply and quickly.
Mhm. So in those years then, so I'd imagine was that like 2011, 2012ish that you went to Full Sail, or what years were that?
2013, 14, and 15. Graduated at the
Okay.
beginning of 2015. Yeah. So I was at Ohio
Okay.
State until
Sounds yeah.
2012, and then yeah, yeah.
Okay. And so did you see a little bit shift in the, I shouldn't say shift in the culture, but like when you went to film school, like did you guys have a little bit of a divide? But it sounded like those 12 that were with you were kind of like the people that were, like I said, they wanted to make AAA blockbusters. It sounds like they're more of the commercial type. Did you run into
Yes.
anybody that was like, we did in our film school, so that's what I'm kind of asking. It's like the maturity level that you had, and these kids were like 18. Did you see that difference, and did it help you having that life experience? I know it did for me greatly. I was writing stuff on screenplays, like stuff I've always wanted to talk about for years, and then you had kids that they're 18, they don't have much for life experience, so they're trying to be edgy, but
Yeah,
they can't be because they just don't know life. And
that's right.
did you run into that? Is there something that that stood out to you that are like, oh yeah, these they're, or at least they're not trying to be art house, or they're trying to be commercial, so they're trying to follow that path? I mean, what was that age difference like?
Yeah,
Going
it's a
going to
great
school,
Yeah, it's a great
classmates.
question. I think you're right. And to be respectful, I get it. If you're 18,
Mhm.
19 years old and you've
Oh
been,
yeah.
reading, comic books and watching comic book movies and action films and fantasy films your whole life, like I did, as well. Like
Mhm.
I'm just as nerdy as those other kids that I was in school with. And then you get this opportunity to go down to a place where you're unsupervised from your parents or wherever you came from, and you're like, yeah, what a great opportunity for me to write my dreams. I totally get
Mhm.
that, and I totally understand. So I don't mean any disrespect, but I did recognize very quickly the practical difference between my approach and their approach, and it's
Mhm.
it's 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 more it's a principle that I've learned even more so since, which is put yourself in the best position to compete with less people.
Mhm.
And if you're writing the big budget screenplay to try to get noticed, like Shane Black did, back for screenwriting nerds who know Shane
Mhm.
Black.
Oh
Shane
yeah.
Black
Oh yeah.
wrote The Last Boy Scout and wrote all these movies, and he wrote
Yep.
these screenplays that were like pieces of art in and of themselves. And he kind of created this thing where he's like, I'm going to bust onto the scene as a screenwriter, and people are going to love my screenplays, and they're going to pay me $1 million per screenplay and do that. Well, everybody tries to do that. He created a template where everybody tries to do that, and there's the blacklist, and there's all these big time screenplay
Mhm.
competitions, and film festivals have screenplay competitions as a part of them now. Austin Film Festival, South by Southwest, Florida Film Festival,
Yep.
all these festivals have that. And I just saw, I'm like, well, if everybody's doing that, that means I'm not going to stand out. That means my screenplay is not going to stand out because it's just going to be in the middle of a big fucking stack. I was like, but
Mhm.
but but what could stand out is me actually making a film, right? And so that's
Yeah.
what that first film that we made in class was. And then that professor was also a screenwriter, and he was writing things on the side, and he showed me a screenplay and of his, and I'm like, dude, let's make this. Like, let's get
Yeah.
people together and make this. And so that just became making, and it just became this idea of,
Mhm.
and I would still listen. I would talk to all I'm still Facebook buddies with all those guys and gals
Mhm.
still in the course. Like, we all still chat every once in a while and like each other's stuff and see what's going on. And some of them are working in the industry,
Mhm.
and others aren't. But we still talked about comic books. We still talked about all the AAA stuff. We still loved all those things, and I was
Mhm.
able to kind of jam. But I just noticed a stark difference between what I was writing and what they were writing. And what I was writing were things that
Yeah.
I had an eye towards. Like, when I get to LA, when I get to New York, when I'm doing my thing, I want to be able to actually turn these into a tangible film that
Mhm.
somebody can watch. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of an odd experience, but I was mature enough at least to know that I was mature enough to not criticize, and I never did. I never criticized them. I never said anything. I never even, I just never mentioned it. I just wrote what I wrote, and they gave me feedback as a part of the course, and they wrote what they wrote, and I gave them feedback as a part of the course. And it kind of played out that way.
Yeah. So the discussions that you guys had, I mean, how was that going back and forth, like with your fellow screenwriters? Like I said, that was some of my favorite time was in the
Yeah,
classroom. Like, like I said, online, I did my bachelor's online, and then I, went and got my associates, which was all in person for 2 years. And obviously it's a film school, it's a tech school,
yeah,
but, having those conversations and seeing, the differences and what people's mentalities are when they are, what they're trying to accomplish in film school, kind of figuring that out. And, did you see kind of like, some of these people will make it, some won't. Why are they here? I feel like you probably have a little bit different experience though, because Full Sail tuition is much higher than I went to a community college, so it was very much people that were like, oh, I'll give this a shot,
sure,
or like you could tell they didn't care. At least where I came from, because it was a community college,
yeah.
and then so there was the people that were like, no, this is what I want to do, and the people who were like, I don't know, whatever. At Full Sail, was everybody kind of on that same page then? Like, hey, we all still want to push through because we're spending so much money, because we're dedicating our time here in Florida.
It's actually an interesting question. I've never thought about it that way before. I don't know the answer to that specific question, but what I what I think is an answer to it is that, well, time went away during a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those courses, or a lot of those classes, a lot of those times when we were having. I mean, listen, dude, I was having the most robust conversations about film that I'd ever
Mm-hmm.
had in my entire life, because
Yeah.
up to that point, I was the only person who was, listen, I got made fun of because I said, when I was fucking whatever 14, right, when Attack of the Clones came out and George Lucas had decided to direct Attack of the Clones, and I was like, man, I think I made a comment one time. I was like, I think George Lucas is a really good storyteller and a really good producer and writer, but I just don't think he should have directed that film. I don't think he did a good enough job directing it. I remember people in my family
Yeah.
are like, dude, who are you to say that? And to be fair, who was I to say that? I was just 14, 15 years
Mm-hmm.
old. I had no idea what I was talking about. But that was the beginning formations of a point of view, right? Of taste, of
Yeah.
like an understanding. And I'll never forget, I'm a big M.
Mm-hmm.
Night Shyamalan fan. Even the movies that people don't like I love that dude swings for the fences. And I remember Signs is one of my favorite movies, and I remember the score just being so
Mm-hmm.
um, minimalist, and so just like perfect. And I remember making that comment coming out of that movie, and I remember kind of getting made fun of in my family and with my friends. When The Matrix Reloaded came out, we watched it in my buddy's
Yeah.
basement. I like would pause it and be like, "Hey, did you guys pick up on that?" My best friend was like, "Dude, quit being a douche. We're here just like eating pizza, watching a movie." And so I kind of like always had these experiences where I could never fully be myself, and then I get into this classroom environment
Mm-hmm.
with a published author, or a produced screenwriter, teaching us a course about comedy or horror or thriller or fantasy or whatever it is. And then a bunch of other students, myself, and yes, they're younger and had less life experience, but they're also on the same page in terms of having a point of view and having a perspective and loving something. And so time just
Yeah.
disappeared. I mean, I just
Yeah.
like, to the point where sometimes not being in class was really hard and almost like borderline depressing, because I loved so
Yeah.
much being in the class and having those, yes, philosophical discussions, but also practical discussions about shot listing and,
Yeah.
why this scene takes place this way. Like, why, it's just so it
Yeah.
was very, very freeing, and
Yeah.
amazing to be around a bunch of people that we just jammed all the time, and we
Yeah.
got good
Yeah.
grades for it.
That's awesome. That's great. It's fun to hear that, like your experience in film school, because mine wasn't the opposite, but it definitely was much more gritty, and it was, you could tell the people that were there that wanted to make a career, and the people that, like, said that were there just kind of taking the courses. And also, like, nothing against like the art house, let's make our own film, because I think that's awesome. I think guys that are doing that, but like there was definitely like a divide in not in the not a bad divide, but just in the thought process. Because there's the guys like me who were like Michael Bay, like I defended him tooth and nail
Good for you.
in
Love him.
all his faults and all. Yeah, exactly. Like I was like, what he does is hard, and like it was fun to have those discussions, but it's still in the mentality though of like, when it comes at the end of the day, how are we going to make money? Kind of like what you're thinking, and in the community college sense, it's like you're here because you're here to get a skill to go make money in the next, like it wasn't like going to USC or going to an actual film, or not actual film because it was a film school, but like a film
More
school that you're paying
prestigious one.
20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, prestigious one. Exactly. Like we were down and dirty, and our professor, I loved what he said after the first year. He literally said, "You're not, if you do this, it's hard. Most of you won't make it. I will never see some of you, over half you, I won't see again. It's never too late to become a nurse or an accountant because they make really good money." He goes, this line of work is hard, it sucks, and it's painful.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I was sitting in the classroom like, tell them more,
Yeah.
because coming from the military background, it's weeding out the weak.
Yes.
Like it's like selection, or it's just like joining the military, like going through boot camp, like who has the goal and who doesn't, or who has and who doesn't. And you kind of start, at least in my experience, it's awesome to hear that from yours, because I feel like that would have been pretty fun to go do. Like really everyone in class is on the same page, does want to make films. Whereas like my experience was like you had to kind of be like, go with the people who were like doing it, that were truly like, we need to form our own company, or we need to form our own film, and shooting for basically, I was very much commercial. Like I was like, I want to make commercials. I want to make commercial films. Yeah. And I think, there was that divide, but it's cool to hear your experience, opposed to mine, because mine, you could just tell there's the people and not to make fun or anything like that, but there was like, in my opinion, it was like, put more effort into this, you have all the tools at your, discretion, and, they were just kind of like blowing it off, But again, though, it was a community college, so the stakes weren't as high with the tuition. So I always attribute it to that. But the people that really took advantage, I'm with you. We're still friends today. I'm still friends with the professors. I can't believe it's been like 7 years now. But like, pushing forward with commercial work or something that's going to make a profit and make you money, because it was awesome being like, yeah, we can, here's the big project, here's the ideas, but still at the end of the day, and that film school was like, how are you going to make it in the Minnesota community or in the film community? And that's what they kind of prepped us for, I tell my wife, I still have delusions of grandeur where I'm like, yeah, I am directing $100 million film. Like that is still like my life goal, or my career goal, I should say, career goal. And then I'm still crazy enough to pursue it. And I truly believe that I can still do it, but you got to know, in reality, coming from the military perspective of like, you got to know that it's going to be a grind. You may not make it. You're going to fail a lot. You'll succeed a few times, but you still have to get through that grind. And like I said, I think it's really cool hearing your perspective and seeing, people are just as excited about film school. Like the ones I came from, it was like half and half, people were like, I don't know, like, we'll see where this goes. And then obviously they get weeded out right away, or if this is truly your passion. And then the people also that had talent, like right away you could sniff out the people that are like, and if they didn't have talent, they were developing that talent too, because they were always bringing out lights. They were always like, how do we make this shot better? How do we do this better? How do we make this sound better? How do we make this script better? So coming out of film school, then what was your experience like, going from Full Sail and then, jumping into the industry? Like, how was that for you?
Yeah. So fun story for my last month in film school. So the last month at Full Sail, I still think it's true to this day. You have a portfolio course, right? Where you put your whole portfolio together. I think you have like 3, right? It's like you put your your prose portfolio together, your comic book portfolio together, your film portfolio together, whatever. My goal was like film, so I think I kind of just pushed through the other two. I wrote some comics,
Mhm.
I wrote some things. I enjoyed that in college, and like I said, I had a few pieces of flash fiction that were published, and so I kind of built a website and did all that stuff.
Mhm.
And But I had these two screenplays that I was sitting on that I wanted to take with me to LA, which I knew that's where I was going to go after I graduated.
Mhm.
And So I had these two short screenplays, both of which were producible, right? One of which was like a kind of a rom-com that took place in one house over the course of one morning. So I knew that we could shoot that in 1 or 2 days somewhere, right? Wherever I got a
Mhm.
location. And then another one that was kind of it was a GWAT political thriller. It was about an interrogation
Mhm.
scene. It all took place in one interrogation room, right? Super
Mhm.
simple setup, right? So I had this cool,
Yeah.
I've got these screenplays. That second one was the one that was kind of floating around the online competition circuit and was like doing pretty well, and people enjoyed it, which was great. So I kind of had some clout there. It's like awesome. So I've got this portfolio. I'm starting to put it together, and the woman who taught the class, that portfolio class, the film portfolio class, she had been through, like the what's that master's program out west? Big program. It's like through the academy. Can't remember what it's called, but she had like been through that.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
heard of
so she
that. Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
like pretty well connected in the industry, kind of like no bullshit. Um, she and I would like share a cigarette before and after class, like outside. It's just like
Yeah.
kind of the coolest feeling. And
Yep. Yep.
and so we're sitting there in class, probably like second or third day of this class, and she goes, "All right, I want to do an exercise." She goes, "Does anybody? I want you to everybody write a log line for a screenplay that you haven't written yet, but that you have in your mind that you
Mhm.
want to write." Cool. So like I wrote this log line down on this piece of paper, put it in a Crown Royal bag, that she passed around class, and she's like kind of flipping through them quietly. Everybody's like, "What is she gonna do next?" Right? And so she pulls out this piece of paper, my piece of paper, and it's got the log line for a horror film that I had an idea for. And she goes, "Whose is this? Who's it?" And she read it. It was like an inverse of like Beauty and the Beast, like a modern take on Beauty and the Beast, um, where Gaston was the good guy and the Beast was something that needed to actually be killed, right? And so it just kind of like
Yeah.
it's like Southern Gothic kind of like idea that I had, right? And she's like, "This is
Yeah.
a cool idea. Whose is this?" I said, "It's mine." She goes, "I have a friend who's looking to produce a horror film." She goes, "Hold on one second." She's like texting on her phone, and then her phone rings, and she answers it. She goes, "This is my friend," and she answers it, and I swear to God, it's Jennifer Lawrence on the other side of the other side of the phone.
Yeah.
And
No shit.
yeah, sounded like her. She told
Wow.
us it was her, and she's like, "Hey, I've
Yeah.
got one of these. I've got a log line in my class." She starts to kind of describe it, and I go, "Mara, can I come up there and pitch it?" And she goes, "Yeah, sure." So she like puts the phone on speaker, puts it down on the desk, and I like saddle up to it, and I'm like, "Hey, Jennifer," and she goes, "Hey, tell me about your film." And so I pitched it, and she goes, "All right, that sounds like a pretty cool idea." She goes, "Whenever you finish it, send it to Mara, and she'll send it to me." And I was like, "Okay, thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
see you later." And
Mhm.
so I looked at Mara. She winked at me. Went back to class. The end of the class, and all the guys were like, "Yo, dude, that's so cool. You just talked to Jennifer Lawrence."
Yeah.
And so after class, we went outside and had a cigarette. And I'm like, "Hey, is that real?" And she goes, "Yeah, it's real." She goes, "Write it." So I went home and I wrote it over the course of the next 3 days. And I
I
and
love
I
it. That's
and I
love it.
turned it in.
That's
And dude,
great.
I'll tell you this to this. I reread it at the end of last year. It's terrible. It never got to Jennifer Lawrence. But what happened was I got really good
Yeah.
notes from my teacher on the screenplay,
Mhm.
it was a really good lesson in one. I'm capable of writing a feature length screenplay, right? Like I could sit down over the
Mhm.
course of 72 hours, and at the end of that, I can have a finished screenplay, however bad it is, right? So it's like a
Yep.
reinforcement of that. All first drafts are shitty, right? The Hemingway quote. You
Yep.
can get it done,
Mhm.
even if it's not good, right? And then
Yeah.
the second thing I learned was there is a practical application to getting films made, right? You need a star,
Yeah.
you need a producer, you need somebody who needs it, right? You need somebody who can move
Yeah.
things around. And so there's no way in hell Jennifer Lawrence, was going to produce my screenplay and star in it or whatever. But what's great about that experience that bookended my time at Full Sail was like, dude, you're capable of this. And then there's a path forward. You just have to go get in the industry, meet the right people, do the work, and kind of get in those rooms and put yourself out there. So
Yeah.
I did. So I left Full Sail. I went straight to LA. My brother got married in the Dominican Republic, so I went down there first and then went straight to LA. Graduated April of 2015. And so I was boots on the ground in Los Angeles, probably around, I guess, June and middle of June.
Mm-hmm.
Had a friend family friend who had lived in LA for years. I'd visited him a bunch growing up in California. He said that I could stay in his guest room. And so I started applying for, a bunch of jobs on Mandy.com. I don't know if that still exists, but it's basically like a Craigslist for production gigs. And so I was applying for, unpaid PA positions. I was applying for anything and everything. I applied for hundreds. And then these guys called me back, and they saw the military on my resume. And, they saw that I was also a writer and, was artistic as well. And I was expecting to go meet with, these like grizzled old producers who were producing this web series, just a couple of guys my age. And I was kind of like, oh, wow. Like, again, there's people out here doing this. Like, you don't have to be a certain age. You don't have to be a certain rank. You don't have to be a certain anything. You can just do it, right? Just do the work. And so I applied for an unpaid PA position in the assistant director department. So I met with the producers, one of which was the UPM, unit production manager. And they said, hey, this is an unpaid position. Are you cool with that? Yes, 100%. Just want to get some experience. They said, great. We're going to be building the set for the next 3 days in Burbank. And then we're going to be shooting it for the 15 days after that. Great. So showed up to Burbank the next morning. And the second assistant director quit. So they asked me if I wanted to be the second. And I said, sure. And so the UPM gave me a book about the department, about what ADs do, what first ADs do, what second ADs do, and all that stuff. We build the set. I show up the next day. The second AD quit. They're like, hey, can you be the second AD? I'm like, yeah, I'm reading that in this book. Like, I could do that. No problem. So I show up the third and final day before we are getting ready to final set build day. And then we're going to shoot this motherfucker. And the first AD quit. So the UPM looks at me and he goes, do you think that you could be the only assistant director on this project? And I said, absolutely. I had no idea what I was doing. And so thankfully, he was a really great production manager and had an understanding of how all of this stuff worked. So I showed up the next day, the first day of shooting, and I understand how to ferry cast members to and from wardrobe and hair and makeup and the set. And I'd worked with the director on the shot list, and I did all the things that a first AD does. And I took a step back and I realized that the first AD is like the pro super on the flight line of the Air Force. Flight line of the Air Force for fighters, you've got the crew chiefs who take care of the jet. You've got the avionics troops who take care of the electronics. You've got the weapons troops like myself who, take care of all the bomb racks and missile launchers and the guns themselves. You got the air to ground equipment folks who keep the jet, doing all those things. And I'm like, this is what a first AD does. He just makes sure that every department is doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing it. And I immediately started to take that military mindset and just apply it to production. And it was at that moment that I'm like, oh, I might want to be more than just a director. Like, I actually really enjoy the sort of logistics and the entrepreneurial aspects of production and the problem solving and the relationship building and the interdepartmental teamwork that I just saw for 4 years in the military, worked to perfection. So yeah, that was my first experience on set in LA, and super formative. I mean, we shot 165 pages in 15 days. And so for those that aren't film people, production people, that is a lot, and it's damn near impossible. Yeah. But we did it, and it was great.
So what was the reasons that all the other ADs quit before you, and then how did that film turn out, or where did it go?
So it was a web series, and we did. We got it, and so I ended up earning an associate producer credit on that too, because we finished filming and then we got into post, and I did a lot of story work with the producers in post, and it never got past the second round of edits. I think they maybe ran out of money. I'm not sure what happened, but it's unfortunately probably never going to see the light of day. I mean, it's been almost 10 years at this point, I'm
Yeah.
not sure exactly what happened there. I think the producers just ran out of money and weren't able to actually get it finished in post, which is unfortunate. I don't know why the other ads quit. Probably because it was, unpaid or low paid, and they were like, I don't want to be here doing this, building sets and, doing all this. Who knows, right? People have their
Yeah.
reasons, and I didn't really ask. I was just kind of grateful for the opportunity to get a crash course in production.
Hmm. Is that something you found? Like I said, we could probably go on for hours about this. We'll have to definitely do
Yeah,
another one. But that was something I think something within the film community, and then you have a lot more extensive experience than I do. But like even at the level I was at, and it's like the follow through or the finish, like definitely planning stuff out, and there's and again, I always say if you make a film, I think it's great because you did it, but then it's like you got to follow up with like, okay, how good was it? What's the critique? And I don't know, I guess because some guys have told me they're like, hey, do the short film festivals and do and make your own film, and I've always gone against that. And I think you can go both ways. Like I think people that do it great and they'll produce their own films and they get it done. We had a girl in our class. She directed like 10 films, but you look at them, you're like, okay, well, but I'm with you. I'm like, well, she did it though. She made them, But then there's also a quality of like, okay, but how good are they, and are they making a profit? And I know they're not making a profit because they're passion
hmm
pieces, which are fine, but like there's that fine line of like, where do you want to put your effort? You know what I mean? Is that something that you kind of, that's why I never really jumped even in short films. Like I was like, I'd love to do a short film, but it's like the creative process of like, okay, why are we doing this? What's the skill that we're trying to develop? Like I always want to challenge
yeah,
myself. And I always feel like guys that jumped in the film right away and self-produced, like the movies, it sucks. Not saying the movie sucks, but I mean, the process
yeah,
is hard. I saw them go through it and I'm like, I almost would rather spend my resources elsewhere, if that
yeah,
makes sense. Like maybe experimenting, maybe trying something new than dumping 100 grand or the 50,000 into, hiring, some of their friends, to play the parts, and then it doesn't go anywhere. But you made the film though, which is great. But yeah, there was a guy I went to film school with. He finished this movie. It was horrific. It was terrible. And I was like, hey man, I saw him doing a wedding, wedding videographer. I was like, hey, I heard you finished the film. Like, congrats. And he's like, yeah, the movie sucks. It's
yeah,
terrible.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I'm like, yeah, it is.
yeah,
But at the same time, I was like, but you did
yeah.
it though, and for me, I've always been a little hesitant. I mean, like when you see that when you're, like you said, they never finished the web series. They didn't have enough money. Do you see an issue with planning? And then what's your take on that? Like, I know you've done your own
Mhm.
film or, your short films and stuff like that. I mean, how do you feel about that concept? Or do you think, yeah, both can be true at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to make a film, so it's really hard to make a bad film too, right? So echoing
Yeah,
your sentiments,
exactly.
like mad respect to anybody that
Yeah.
finishes it,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's
100%.
hard. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think with those particular producers, yeah, I saw a bit of a lack of planning, a lack of work ethic, frankly, kind of a lack of stamina, really, more than anything, right? The stamina to finish a web series. I mean, there were 8 episodes. It's 165 pages, which means it's roughly 165 minutes, which means it's roughly, 2.5 hours, conservatively. That's a lot of content. That's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
content to edit. That's a lot of content to give notes on. That's a lot of content
Yeah,
to
it
like,
is. Yeah.
do that. The director, the producers ended up having a falling out with the director. I went and a second AD to film with that director who was the first AD, kind of after that project, and he kind of like fell off a little bit. And so I saw the lack of cohesion, lack of stamina, lack of leadership. Like what's the hierarchy here? Like
Mm-hmm.
what are we building? What are we doing? How are we going to execute and deliver on these things? So I don't. It wasn't intentional at the time, but I started to put those pieces together pretty early, and I realized that like when you're the director, or you're the executive producer of a film, like you're leading the charge, you're leading the entire organization, and that kind of organization is that one film. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think I started to develop an understanding of like how to actually produce, right? And the producing is it's an art and a science, right? So it's the science of logistics, but it's the art of relationship building, and it's the art of leadership. And so
Yeah.
trying to put those two things together is really important. I also just had the understanding for marketing, like to your point, like get something finished and try to deploy it to places where it can get the recognition that it deserves, which might not be any recognition, right? Like that's the scary part of making
Yeah.
art. You might make something and people might say, I don't like that. That's not good. And that happens, right?
Mhm.
But we went
Mhm.
to, so we finished that film. I went with the director. Well, he first AD'd and I second AD'd a feature length horror film out in Metropolis, Illinois, like right after we wrapped. Like I'm talking the morning we wrapped, we got in a 9 pass and drove to Illinois. And that movie turned out to be really bad, but I'm very proud of the work that we all did on that. It's kind of like one of those like B movie, horror things. And it was pretty fun
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
funny and goofy and silly and dumb, but great. And actually, the UPM who was supposed to be who was on the web series was supposed to come with us, but he quit. So I was kind of second AD where I was in charge of all the talent, but then I was also the unit production manager as well, where I was working with the producers, the director, and the screenwriter to make sure that
Mhm.
we were actually able to execute all the scenes in this small town that we had
Mhm.
rented out some locations in or whatever. And we were sleeping on the floor at City Hall. It was cool. Such a fun it was like a really
Yeah.
shitty TDY or like a deployment. It was like kind of like one of those like really
Yeah.
fun experiences as a filmmaker,
Yeah.
and kind of member of a crew. And that's where I started to kind of develop that, like, all right, I got to lead this team. And so I said, I was like, hey, I've got to the crew. I'm like, I've got 2 screenplays, one of which we can shoot at my mom's house in San Diego pretty easily. I was like, who wants to do it? Because they all get paid.
Yeah.
We all get paid for our day jobs. So like
Mhm.
in filmmaking, right? And I do this now with commercial filmmaking where it's like,
Mhm.
okay, we all get paid to make, TV commercials and online videos and marketing. So on the weekends, let's make some
Mhm.
stuff. And so that's kind of the
Yeah.
approach that I took. And everybody was like, yeah, man, I'm down. Like, let's go. So I was like, my mom will feed you. We can all sleep in the house and then we'll clean up all the futons and then we'll shoot. And so that's what we
Yeah.
did. And I directed my first film, that I had written and co-produced it with the producers of that web series. But also I knew from
Mhm.
the mistakes that they were making in post on that. I'm like, all right, we're going to produce this together. So I'll let them do the things that I know they're good at, which was galvanizing the troops, getting a production shoot off the ground. But
Mhm.
I need to be thinking about post. I need to be thinking about festivals. I need to be thinking about marketing. I need to be
Yeah.
thinking about the kind of portfolio that we're building together. And so I started to put those pieces together. And the goal always was and still is just like never stop working. So like I
Yeah.
made that, we did the web series, I did the feature, we did my first short film. While we're in post on my first short film, we started pre-production on my second short film. And it was just like, let's go,
Yeah.
let's go.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and that's something that I've learned too a lot, even to this day, and we've talked about it, and I've talked about it with just companies and marketing when it comes to video content. No one thinks to the back end, like, and I've always stuff like when I shoot, I always think shoot in my own filming style. I'm like film for the
Yep.
edit or shoot for the edit, like because I've had guys like, how do we edit this, and I'll go in because I love editing at the same time. So like knowing kind of like a jack of all trades, but being really good at a few, you know. And so like when I shoot something, I'll be like, this is how I'm going to edit that. And I actually, in film school, you learn some guys just don't have the experience, and they're like, how is this even going to cut together? And then you get into the edit, and I cut it, and they're like, oh yeah, and I'm like, yeah, this is, as a director, you have to be creative, but then at the same time, you got to kind of know if you're directing, you're still directing the edit, and so you kind of want to guide it, and so when you see those moves on camera, like why is the camera pushing in? It's like, well, I want it to cut here, or why, wow, it's not is
Yeah.
Edgar Wright? Yeah, Edgar Wright. Does the
Yes.
whip pans, and he does them, but you're going from one set to 10
Yeah.
days later, and you got to
Yeah.
remember that. Like, and so that's all planned for the edit. He
Yeah.
shoots for the edit. Like, in fact, he's editing on the
I mean,
go,
he
depending on what he's doing.
writes for the edit. Like he knows, like when he writes his
Yeah. Oh,
screenplays, if you've
yeah.
ever read
Yeah.
his screenplays, like he knows those transitions are built in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're to a T, and they're like, and then it's all the beat of
Yep.
the song, and yeah, all that stuff. But yeah, I think that's something that we all kind of like see, even in today. Like I deal with it with clients as well. As like, all right, we're gonna do this really cool stuff. What's the end? What's your end goal? What is I line up an editor before we even start
Mm-hmm.
filming. Like, this is the guy that's going to
Yep.
edit your piece, and it's done, and you're going to pay him, and we're going to just not kill the project, but it's
Yep.
completed. And then whenever you want to launch, and I can't, it's one of those things where like, I hope it works out and it makes you a profit, but I can't control that anymore. And so, I think getting the experience within the film industry and like I said, like what you're doing, you're in producing, it sounds like it's kind of like that's the back end, and like my thought here, but like just knowing the back end, and I think with the military being like, hey, what's the
Yeah.
end goal? Like, what are our
Yeah.
objectives? You know, like we have to have an objective of like, what's the final going to look like? We have to finish this project, and that's, you know, God bless them. Like I always kind of go back to it where guys like, we're making a movie. I was like, you've been making that movie for 5 years now. Like you've been doing pickups. You know, God bless you, but at the same time, I think that's what kind of gives me a bit of a sour taste in my mouth with like when someone's like, just make a movie. I'm like, no, I just don't want to. I don't want to. If you want to put your best foot forward and you're going to make a full length feature film, you know, it's kind of like, you're right. Put that extra effort in. Can we get a star? Can we get the funding? Can we go that extra mile? And I think when people start getting older, the passion kind of starting to line up with like funding and practicality. You know, have you kind of run into that? Like, yeah, let's make this feature. All right, before we even start press record, let's get $5 million on the horn. Well, we can't do that. Be like, well, then it dies, you know, or like, oh, we need to get this actor because we need to make our money back. Like almost having that risk. Like I feel like when you make that first feature, or even my friends have made, you know, a feature and they're like, oh, you know, whatever. And it's like, well, no, not whatever. Like that's somebody's, you know, like I feel like that pressure, maybe this comes from the military or this comes from our discipline of being like, there's $5 million on the line. Don't fuck this up. You know, I think that would really scare people to being like, oh my God, we have to do this right. You know, or whatever, you know, that type of pressure to then be like, is this script worth it? And every story can be worth it if you develop it correctly. I mean, if you think about like Avatar, like look at that log line.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrific. You know what I mean? Or like any other film, you're like, Jesus, you know, Star Wars, or like some of the biggest names or the biggest films, you look at the log line, that could be the shittiest student film, or it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise.
Yeah.
You know,
no doubt.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I think about, so
Yeah.
it's interesting. I very much have an indie mindset, right? Where like, even now, so I mean, we're kind of skipping over a bunch, which is fine, but like, I work in production now on the advertising side. So I run, you know, the EP and head of production at an advertising agency where we do, you know, commercial filmmaking in the sense of, you know, marketing and advertising and TV commercials, online videos, social, and all that stuff. And the goal for me in getting into that industry was always to get out of waiting tables and tending bar while I was making my indie films in order to make more money, make a living, have a cushion to actually go, you know, make the indie films that I wanted to make on the side, right? That's how the podcast got started. It was kind of like one of those things where working in the industry every day, kind of building the skills, building the relationships, getting the reps and all of that in order to facilitate these kind of indie projects that I wanted to do. And so, that's what I did for the first few years working in advertising in LA and then in New York. Was like it was cool. I can take these resources and I can use them to make more short films and make web series and like do different things. And I don't actually have to spend that much money or any money really. If the relationships are strong enough and the interest is there from everybody who wants to participate, like we're just friends making stuff on the weekends. And if you're good and you have talent, that stuff that you're making on the weekends is actually pretty good. Right. And so it's not like something where people feel bad doing it. I had one experience. We were developing a feature for me to direct with the producer, the other producer from that web series. And he had co-produced my first two short films and had starred in the second short film. And he had written an awesome feature-length screenplay about a really funny idea that I just thought had legs. And I'm like, man, this is really funny, and it's probably relatively inexpensive for us to shoot. And you know, I bet we can do it for, you know, low six figures. But it was one of those films where if you're gonna make that film, you need a name, at least like a B name, right? C name to be in that film. Or, you know, this was well before, like, I mean, this was almost 10 years ago. Like this was, I mean, so much has changed since then that now you could probably make something without a name and do well in the festival circuit. But even back then, like you really couldn't. And so we spent a lot of time taking meetings, like doing the classic Hollywood thing, like taking generals, you know, and like, you know, taking a general meeting with this person. And, you know, we met people that were like, yeah, if you can get this piece, then I can get this piece. And then we'll put those two pieces together. And then that third piece is going to come together. And then, we can make a movie. And it was an interesting experience, and it was kind of cool, right, to get in those rooms and have those conversations and meet celebrities and like do all of that. But I just remember being like, man, this is bullshit. Like, I just want to make movies. And so I just have that indie mindset of like, let me just make the things that I want to make at the level that I'm making them right now, and the connections will come whenever they come. And I want to spend as little money as possible, not because I'm cheap, but just because I don't want the overhead to be too high. And so I'm actually like I'm getting back into it. I've been doing the podcast here
Mhm.
for a couple years, and now I'm directing another short film. I guess this will be
Oh
live by
yeah.
the time we've shot it, but about at the end of this month,
Mhm.
beginning of March, while we record,
Mhm.
I'm going to go to Alabama and direct a 3 minute, a 5 page horror film. And again, it was like what attracted me to the screenplay. I didn't
Yeah.
write it; a friend of mine wrote it. And what
Mhm.
attracted me to the project was two people, one location, 5 pages. That means we can shoot that motherfucker in a day.
Love it.
Like I'm not here to mess around.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'm not trying to like, hey, let's see the most famous
Mhm.
person we can get. We want the score to be this and the visual effects to be this. It's like, no, let's keep it simple. Let's
Mhm.
execute the fundamentals. And then I've done well enough on the festival circuit, especially in the horror side of things up to this point, that I've got a list of festivals that we can at least cut the line to get our film seen to potentially
Yeah.
be shown. And so it's just like building those
Yep.
reps and executing the fundamentals, and doing things that way, that kind of indie mindset, that like Duplass brothers mindset, like that's
Yeah.
my interest. That's what gets me excited to do this work.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's wild because you talk about Duplass too. Those guys, how much does it help? Have you at least seen in your experience? If you like, some of those guys are friends though with the celebrities they put into their films. Because I mean, I remember watching one. I was like, oh, that's good, and I'm like, well, it's like three
But they were
celebrities
friends
in there.
before they became celebrities, and that's the difference.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's what I mean. Like that's the thing is like they're like, of course I'll do. I'm like, good luck getting Aubrey Plaza or I can't remember who was in it. That was like, you're not going to get them for your, but they were friends before that, and I think, like that is the beauty. I think a little bit of. I know I had talked to a buddy who had a friend that went to
mm-hmm.
USC film school, and they were like, you pay for the connections into the industry. You don't go to USC to actually learn how to make films. Like, I mean, yeah, you do, but they're like, it's the network. It's like going to Harvard Law. Like, you go to Harvard Law because it's
Yeah,
Harvard Law. Like, same
yeah,
with USC. They were, because I looked at USC and I'm like, this is garbage. I mean, and I granted in 2004 when I looked at it, I didn't realize that's what you spent the money on. Because they were like, you're not going to touch a camera till your junior year, and I'm like, well,
the
why the
fuck
hell would
I'm
I pay
not.
you $80,000? Yeah, exactly. Like, hey, you're going to learn about the film theory. I'm like, again, I'm like you. We're from the
Yeah,
exact same generation. It's like DVD commentaries. Like, I want to learn how to make this. I don't care about I care about the film theory, but like, I'm here to press record and to do the production and to make it to that point where someone can criticize and make a
correct.
theory
Yeah,
about it. Like I'm the one that I want to get it
yeah.
to that point, and
It's also
so,
like
yeah,
I
I
was
mean,
loading bombs in Afghanistan last year. I'm not going to wait another 3 years to do the thing that I want to do. I want to like do the thing that I want to do.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Or tell it. Yeah. Exactly. And like just keep pushing forward with. I mean, like I said, I love that take on it. Like I said, I think and calculating too. Like you said, your day job is within it. You're producing, you're EPing. I'm the same way. My day job is working on either making commercials or doing whatever else productions, and kind of come making some of those side projects come to life. And I do agree with you on that. What is your view on doing the spec scripts or doing spec scenes? That's kind of becoming a thing. I remember when I was in film school from 14, 16, people still kind of do it, but it's like they're is that something that you've seen in the industry at all, or anything that what you guys are doing back in the day? Like, we're gonna pump 20 grand into this 5 minutes,
yeah,
and some people even pay for like one day they get a
right.
celebrity, like you're on his rate, but it's going to help elevate and push that one scene. And then here's the script. And then do you ever see that at all when you were in
I
LA and
did.
all that
I did.
in
Yeah. So
those
I
years?
had I had the great experience of working with, and I'm a big believer in taking unpaid work, in order to
Yeah.
when you're first starting to get the experience and get the opportunities.
Oh yeah.
And I know it's controversial. Probably it's not controversial in our community because we're all like
No, no, no. Yeah.
blue collar service
Mhm.
folks, service members who are like, yeah, no,
Yep.
I'll do whatever I can to go
Yeah.
do the thing I want to do. But kind of like within the film
Yep.
industry,
Yep.
it's a little like, well, no, you're owed your day rate, you're owed minimum wage and all that stuff. And I think that's horseshit personally. So
Mhm.
I took a couple
Mhm.
of unpaid gigs while I was in LA, one of which was a web series that I was the first AD on. called Break a Hip. And it was produced by these two guys who one of them is he's a production manager, line producer in like reality TV, and then his husband is a like a theater director, like classically trained actor, brilliant guy, super smart, really nice people. They're awesome. I met them through a friend. And they were like, we need a first AD, but we can't pay. I'm like, I would love to come help and learn, because like what you all do what I want to do eventually. So I'm going to benefit from just being around it. Right. So I show up to their house and they're like, all right, cool. So here's the script. Here's the cast. And then they put forward the cast in front of me, and just A-lister after A-lister, Allison Janney, Emmy and Oscar winning actress, Jim Rash, who was on Community and wrote Up in the Air. There was like a handful of other like names that you would recognize, and I'm like, holy shit, like this is unpaid. Like in my head, I'm like, all right, whatever. I get to meet these people and work with these people, and it's awesome. And so I'm around them on these sets, and I realize these guys spent as little money as possible, but these are all their homies. Like they all came up in Tennessee together. And then it turns out that like going back to that group of people was like Sandra Bullock and I'm trying to think of the other woman's name. She's on that true crime show right now. Whatever. Just like a list of celebrities that you would know. And I'm like, wait, hold on. You're all just helping each other to make something. And the mom from Friends was the other co-star in the show. It's just like mind blowing. It's like, I'm like, I get exposed to these people who are just friends with each other, who just want to make art together, and they make really great money doing everything else. So they're just showing up to help their friends. And I realized, I'm like, oh. So they were friends with Allison Janney before she was famous. They weren't like, oh, now that you're famous, Allison, can you come make this thing with us? They all came up together. So I don't personally have the approach of like, how do I work to a spot where I can enlist a celebrity? I want to work with a group of people that we're all going to grow up in the industry together. And maybe one person does become a celebrity. And then that's the only way that I would get that. But like my mindset is so indie. It's so Duplass Brothers. I'm just like, I just want to make shit with my friends. And if we're good enough, it'll happen that way. I don't know. Does that answer your question? I wasn't trying to be like a douchebag and drop too many names, but it's just a really good anecdote, I think.
That's great. No, it's awesome. I think that's great, because I think that's something that, as digital technology, I guess, a little bit on the technical side. I mean, now we're finding out how people have maneuvered, and do that kind of stuff. Like hearing your story there, be like, oh, well, they must have paid a bunch of money. And kind of goes like, no, these are just friends that have come up together. But it's also like, I love doing these podcasts, and I also listen to podcasts and watch some of the YouTubes, and some of these people that are in the industry that are indie and or big time filmmakers. And just to hear them talk about like the real deal stuff, like, yeah, of course you're not going to get them all because they're friends and they all came up together, like kind of setting that expectation a little bit, but also giving that ray of hope a little bit of like, I have heard that too, where guys are like, this is the day rate of not Chris Pratt, but like, these are the day rates of Zach Levy. These are the day rates of here. Like, yeah, it's going to cost you 20 grand. Cool. Well, let's raise 30 and we spend 10 on production and 20 on Zach Levy. Why? Because he's the star of Shazam, and he likes, and like to your point, there's nothing wrong with making, those guys are, if especially in their Hollywood, the tax system there, like 20 grand is not, they're going to be like, oh, that's an extra 20 grand. Like that's actually, like I got to pay tax, but that can, that's a payment on the house. Like, it's, as long as they're not like crazy Johnny Depp level type, or who knows, maybe even Johnny Depp, but like it's still like, just because they get made $10 million on a film does not mean that they're seeing that money. That money does not go very far. So when you start going into these projects, like they would love to do that. And you're right too. It's still the art of the craft. Like I'll still love to go on to a short feature. Like I did a short feature for my buddies that raised money, and they paid. I didn't really get paid either, but I was like, just pay for some of the equipment. And, it was fun. I'll never show it to anybody. Like I DP'd it because they had a 17-year-old playing a mad scientist, and it was like a comedy, and it was just like, but it was great because they put money into it. But it was like, and I put a ton of effort. I mean, we were doing like 16-hour days, and there is that creative, like, yes, it's great. But then it came to post-production. They're like, yeah, the guy editor was like, I learned the, Adobe, Premiere like last week. I just been reading a lot of tutorials, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh shit, like, okay, this is cool, homies.
Yeah.
We came together. You guys raised like $2,000. You did it. We had extras. It was a blast. I'll never
Yeah.
show the,
Yeah.
the light of
Yeah.
day, but it was fun though. I do agree with you on that aspect of like, sometimes at the end of the day, it's just awesome to make
Yeah.
that piece of art. Even though we come from a technical perspective, especially from the military, but at the end of the day, we are we are creatives and we are making art. And I think that's always kind of like the end goal, like it's having fun, creating that art, and maybe hope to God someday we'll make a profit and become famous.
Yeah. Or we won't.
maybe,
But whatever.
maybe.
That works too. Yeah.
Or we won't. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or whatever. Yeah, yeah, that works too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah. Well, it was awesome, man. I definitely want to have you on again.
Yeah.
It's bullshit and to go through it. Because there's like, I know you have like way more stories and we go into, we're already at the hour 20 mark. So I'll let you go. I know you got meetings to run to and time hack. So, but yeah, this was amazing. We'll definitely have you on again. Go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, for sure.
Further. So thanks
for having me. This was a blast, and I'm certainly open to doing it again whenever you want.
Absolutely. Where can people find you and whatnot? And, especially if you want to plug where
Yeah,
you work.
for sure. So I'm
et
the executive producer and head of production at Circus Maximus. We're a full service creative agency, strategy, creative, and production. And circusmaximus.com was where you can find our work in contact form if you're a brand and interested and need that. I also have a podcast called Veteran Made. You can find that at Veteran Made on Instagram and getting Twitter up and running as well. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. So just Carey Kight on LinkedIn. Drop me a note, shoot me a connection request and a message. Happy to anybody who's interested in film or filmmaking or film school or transitioning into the creative arts in any capacity. More than willing and open to have a conversation. So yeah, slide into those DMs as they say. And I'm happy to chop it up anytime.